Sweet home Alabama, Clayton! You guys shred! 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 You guys shred!
Welcome to You Guys Shred. When you play drums at a monster truck rally at the age of 9, fans of Asking Alexandria find out where you live, and when you rip some donuts in your front yard in your tan Honda Accord. I am your host, Keaton Stewart.
I'm your co-host, Tyler Christensen.
If you guys like what we're doing and want to support the podcast, please subscribe, share, and review.
You can find our musical project, Poet Bones, on all your preferred streaming platforms, as well as our merch at poetbones.com.
Today's guest is an extraordinary human that I consider to be the godfather of metalcore. He has recorded and produced bands such as Asking Alexandria, Of Mice and Men, The Devil Wears Prada, Attack Attack, We Came as Romans, Miss May I, Oceano, I See Stars, Attila, Bless the Fall, and Crown the Empire, just to name a few. He also runs and operates multiple companies, including Joey Sturgis Tones, Drum Forge, Nail the Mix, and URM Academy. Please enjoy Joey Sturgis.
Thanks so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate you spending your time. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, of course. I was hoping we could start off with maybe shedding some light on a story I have where it was NAMM 2016, and you know how NAMM can get. There's tons of people walking around, pandemonium, and somehow I tripped. I don't know if I tripped or if someone, kind of got in my way and I fell, but I physically bumped into you, like literally bumped into you. Didn't realize it. I'm pretty sure you're like, oh, sorry. And I'm like, oh, no, it's okay. Walked a couple feet and then, oh, I think I just bumped into Joey fucking Sturgis. You remember that at all? It was by like the movie.
Oh, man. Those things are all a blur. I feel like I probably bump into 10 people every day at NAMM, but yeah, that's pretty wild. Did you ever loop back and meet me later that day or anything?
I don't think so. So I like to think it's true, but I mean, hopefully it's true. I just thought it was so funny because it was one of those things like out of all the people I could have bumped into, I bumped into you.
I mean, it very well could be possible. I've been going to NAMM since 2015. So yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Let's just call it real.
It's
really
canon.
I can tell the story. I can have confidence. He said it's real. It's for sure true. So I'd like to kind of start at the kind of the beginning. And I know that you grew up in like a very musical household. You were playing drums in bands from like 8 or 9. You have an uncle that like records in Nashville. Just kind of curious, like what was the music like situation in the house when you were growing up? Like what music was playing?
Well, when I was like in my early teens, I kind of went down the nu metal rabbit hole. And I had an older cousin who was listening to like, stuff like Meshuggah. And he would take me places like, I'd ride in his car because he had his license and all this stuff, but I'm young at this point, right? And I'm like exposed to like Meshuggah at the age of like 13, 14. So, fast forward like another 6 or so years where I'm 19 now and I'm starting to record other bands. It's like I've been listening to Meshuggah for like 5-6 years, and they still hadn't really broken into like the US real big yet. But just having that early exposure to like sort of the next thing in metal before anyone else has always been like a continuous part of my upbringing, and I think that is kind of what gave me the building blocks that I used to approach like these metalcore and metal projects as a producer. But yeah, just a lot of like new metal. My parents, they really encouraged me to just get into whatever I liked. They didn't like gatekeep me from anything. Now the kind of music that they were into and that they played would be like classic rock, like Journey, Foreigner, Eagles. And it's weird because now that I'm much older, I'm 38, I actually find myself gravitating more towards that style of music than the metal stuff that I grew up with. So and also a very strong influence of blues and jazz. My grandpa played jazz guitar, and my dad loves to play blues guitar as well. So kind of a eclectic household of music for sure.
So what would you say was like your first memory, like your first musical memory?
I might not know the first one, but I can definitely tell you one that's interesting. I remember being like maybe like 7 or 8 years old, and that song "Are You Gonna Go My Way" by Lenny Kravitz came out, and they had that black female drummer in the band,
Mhm.
and I don't know why, but I just loved that song, and I loved the music video, and I loved the drum beat. And so I would go in our basement and like try to play that song for like hours and hours, days and days. And I kind of cut my drum playing chops on that song, like in the early days.
Interesting.
Hmm.
I was kind of curious why drums? Like you started with drums, right?
Yeah. I mean, my parents tell me stories of just being sitting on the kitchen floor or just banging on pots and pans and stuff. And I mean, I grew up on tour as well. Like there's some pictures of me like I'm on stage, sitting behind a guitar amp with drumsticks, hitting stuff while they're on
Oh,
stage playing.
that's awesome.
Yeah. So it just kind of was what it is. I think when you're that young, everything is impressionable. So you see like the good time that the drummer is having, he's moving his arms and playing a song and stuff. And you're a kid and you're just like, yeah, I want to move my arms and do
Yeah.
that too.
I got a ball of energy ready to yeah.
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 I was gonna say, I think that's where it came from. Just being exposed to that environment and seeing it all happen.
What was your first drum kit then? Was it a nice one since your parents were musical?
Um, no.
They're like, we'll get him a shitty one just in case.
Yeah. But the cool thing that happened to me is that my dad would play with a lot of different bands. So like I do remember going to people's houses where they had like a really nice drum kit, and I would be like, "Can I please play on it?" And they were like, "Okay, just 5 minutes." So I got to do that, and then like as I got a little older, I got enrolled in drum lessons at the guitar shop where my dad worked.
Mm.
The guy was the guitar shop was owned by a drummer, and he did drum lessons in the basement, and he'd have two drum sets set up down there. So like you would be the student on one drum set and then flip, and he's facing you on his drum set, and he's like, all right, now play this, and then I play that. And so I got pretty good at drums with those lessons, and then that just naturally gravitated towards joining a band. And the first band that I was in, I was like 9 years old, and all the other band members were like 24, 25, and we would play shows. Like I would play like Green Day, Basket Case. We'd play like what's that Alice in Chains song, Man in the Box.
Mm.
So I grew up playing like 2000 cap like monster truck shows. Like, and then
Sunday.
it got kind of weird when we all hit like high school and the other guys graduated already and we're moving to like sort of like trying to get into a national circuit, and I was still this like 17, 18-year-old kid, right? And so they kind of like got a person that was their age to be the drummer, and I got kind of pushed out, and I had a chip on my shoulder about that for quite a long time, but eventually that led into me being in the studio, working with other bands and starting to get good at recording and stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's so cool that most parents aren't even supportive of their kids playing music, let alone you're being engulfed in it. And I think that probably says to why you have accomplished what you've been able to, is like, because like historically you went to that Devil Wears Prada show, you saw them, you're like, oh, I got to record these guys' band. And then you went up to them and, it took like 7 months of convincing. I'm just curious if you believe in like destiny or anything, because it feels like there's so many things in your stories that like if this wouldn't have happened, if you wouldn't have went and talked to them, if you wouldn't have had your friend's garage to go and record out of, like there've been so many different variables that if they wouldn't been ticked, do you believe like in destiny in any sense?
Yeah, I think anything amazing has two sides. One side being there has to be some kind of underlining skill or talent or knowledge or experience or something. And then the other side is just exactly what you're saying, like pure luck, like just making the right decision at the right moment and, being in the right place at the right time. That's my whole life. It really, like, if I told my whole story from start to finish, it'd be like a crazy, it'd be kind of like a crazy movie. Essentially, it's like,
Yeah.
I got all these amazing things one after another that came at me, and I just decided I made the right decision. And now it's kind of a thing of not necessarily like defense, but it's more like I have to focus my path now that I know like where I can take this. It's like I have to push out stuff because I have all kinds of opportunities coming my way, like, but I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I've got to focus on this mission that I'm on right now, which is, my whole path behind me has led up to this, and I'm going to keep going in that direction. So it's almost like I've got to defend that path versus like the one that I was forging before.
Right. Interesting. I was wondering if, I mean, that kind of brings me into whereas like I was wondering if you kind of struggled with like living in the moment, because obviously someone in the industry that has achieved what you've achieved, you're constantly being reminded of the past and wanting to be, as fans, we want you to tell stories from the past. But is it hard to kind of stay in that, like, no, I need to focus on what I'm doing now and forward? Because you seem to me you're a futurist. You have so much going on, and your goal is always trying to make other people make great music and help them. So like, where does that drive come from?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely live inside of the next step, if that makes sense. So I'm pretty much not really in the present moment. I'm always thinking, what is the next piece of this puzzle, and how do I create it, or how do I find it? And yeah, I mean, it's exhausting. Like, that's probably the hardest part of the whole thing, is really just to be focused on always coming up with the next tool that people are going to want to use. Always thinking of what's the next way to teach people as knowledge starts to become a commodity. And yeah, it's challenging, but you always have like a level of things in front of you. Like, I can tell you, like, oh, the password system on our website's messed up right now. Like, okay, that's one thing in front of me. Doesn't necessarily like move me into the future. So that's like in the present moment. So you have a good collection of those kinds of things that you need to tackle right away, but you're always paying attention to what's the roadmap, like what comes after this and what comes after that. And because of this, that's going to change this, which is then going to lead to this. And so my brain is going back and forth a lot, but I'm mostly focused on what's next. And it's also hard because, a lot of my work now is not based on making records. It's running a company. I'm building a software company and an education company that help people learn how to produce music and help people, give people the tools to produce music on their own. And so that comes with a whole, running an organization, creating a company culture, like providing like a place where people can like grow as video editors or as graphic designers or whoever's a part of the team, right? And that's a whole other thing that like I learned how to do as well, because I don't have leadership skills. Like I learned them as I go. Just like anything else in my life, it's just a new challenge that I've taken on. But I think that I've boiled down all of this into one thing that I'm good at, which is problem solving, and essentially building a company or making a record or working with an artist that's difficult or trying to get a label to pay you. All of these things require like problem solving. And I think I'm naturally good at that. My first job and last job that I ever worked that wasn't for myself was at a computer shop, and I was troubleshooting computers. So it's like always been in my life, and I feel like I've always been pretty good at it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I guess that's the whole kind of emphasis of our podcast is rolling with the punches and just trying to highlight the lowlights of what it is. And not obviously there's the glamorous side of it, but probably the 80% of it is, like you said, just troubleshooting.
Yeah.
I guess speaking of the past, if you don't mind going back a little bit, but just kind of curious how it was like, because obviously, like you said, you've started, recording in the garage, and you kind of didn't know what you were doing in a sense. You're like, I got these tools and this is what I got to work with, and it's all in the box. I'm just DIY punk rocking it. And I feel like, I don't know, you can kind of tell me if this is accurate or not, but because you didn't know exactly what you're doing and you're kind of just learning as you're going and getting on forums and just trying to figure things out, you got yourself to like a new place or a higher level than if you knew the rules. You're actually breaking them and figuring out your own way and getting you to a new spot.
Yeah, I would back that. Like that's, I think the most prolific people in our time have kind of sat down and played with the toys the way they weren't designed. Like, it's, I do look up to people like Ross Robinson, for example, he'll just break he'll record drums in a basement of a church and just be like, yeah, those are the drum tracks. Like, all right, cool, man. Or like even people like Elon Musk is like, no, actually, we can make a card that just runs on a battery. Yeah, we're gonna have to put charging stations all over everywhere, but we're gonna do that and kind of break those molds. I think those people who think that are like that and are willing to do that in their respective fields are the people who move things forward. I've never been a traditionalist. I didn't go to college. I don't really, I'm not like, I'm a structured person, but I'm also kind of very DIY, like you're saying. Like sometimes I'll just wake up one day and I'll be like, oh man, the strategy that we're doing right now, it's so stupid. And I just thought of why. And I know that we said we were going to do it until May, but now we're not, because I literally can't keep doing the strategy because I understand why it's stupid. Like just break it all apart and change it up. Like, whatever has to happen is what happens. And if you're afraid of taking those risks, you move a lot slower through life and through the world. And so I try to be a risk taker. I think that's where the magic is, and I'm not afraid to do things a little differently, or to break the rules. And yeah, speaking to back in the old days, right? Recording the first Devil Wears Prada demo with a Behringer mixer and putting 3 different tom mics into one channel, and then having to manually go into the automation lane and pan the toms as they are hit because they're on one track, one mono track, all the tom hits. I mean, that's creative problem solving right there. Yeah. Like, and I don't know if any of that shit was in phase, but
oh man, I think that's so cool though, because it's like you're essentially like the Butch Vig, like obviously he recorded like Nirvana and all these different bands in that time. You're that for your generation. Like you ended up, being in this garage. There's no bathroom. If you want to take a shit, you got to drive down to the gas station, but you're still recording all these people for like $80 or whatever it is. And it's just, it doesn't matter like what the tools are. It matters who's behind it. And if you're willing to spend the time and have that drive and go in and do all the drum edits and go that extra mile, at the end of the day, the other things are just tools. And it does, it's who's using the tools. Yeah.
I think I had the energy too. That's another, because you mentioned the drum editing thing. Like one of the stories I've always told is, in that first Prada record, like I messed up the kick and I wanted to fix it. And the only way that I could come up with a way to fix this was to manually copy and paste the kick drum for the whole album. And because I didn't know any other way. So I'd start my day like 7 or 8 in the morning, copy and pasting them kick drums all the way till 8 p.m. Like
just chain smoking.
Yeah, just chain smoking, energy drinks, copy paste, copy paste. you know. And then the label's like, how many more days until we're going to hear a first mix? And I'm like, well, I just copy and pasted all the kicks for the first two songs, you know. So like it was a time that I had the fire though. I was like, I want to do this. I want to be good at this. And so I just, yeah, whatever it took, you know.
I feel like, I mean, like you said, whatever it took, but it I feel like if you didn't do that, obviously none of this would have happened. And you, obviously, we kind of grew up watching all those bands and watching your YouTube channel and all the different bands vlogs and stuff. And every time they're like messing around and whatever, you're over here like just clacking away and smoking and whatever else because you got to get all their shit done and edit it. And it was also one of those things too is we had that like switch in our brain where it's like, oh, like you think that all these records are being done in these big, beautiful studios like it used to be with the big consoles and everything. And then you see those vlogs and you're like, oh no, he's got it all in the box. He's just recording the drums in his house. You know, if he can do it, we can do it. It really just is a matter of, you know, setting out. And then you continue to do that by putting out your own like tones and different drum forge and all the URM lessons and just trying to help other people do the same thing instead of like trying to guard all your secrets. And you're like, no, this is what I do, this is how I do it, and you're just open. And there's so much free things on the internet you put out there to help other people. It's really commendable that you've done all that, I think.
Yeah, I think I've found it to be really the kind of the funnest part of being a part of this journey is to give it back, like to pass the torch. There's a lot of I get a lot out of that. Like a lot of fulfillment comes from doing that, and I'm really fortunate to be in a place to where I can actually deliver that in a very like high quality, very consumable, very compact like format. You know, the plugins, for example, they've got easy to understand designs. They're very lightweight, like, or you talk about URM or Nail the Mix, the fact that we can show you how a guy from Sweden mixes like the, death metal track of the year, and we don't even like, we can just have him on the show and you can see exactly, you can look into his session. You have the same files that he has. Like it's so cool to be providing that to so many people. And I get a lot out of it. I think that it's a passion of mine I've learned about myself is teaching. And it's weird because I should have known it all along. Like even when I was back in the garage, I was teaching Tyler Smith, I was teaching Nick Sampson, I was teaching Nick Scott, like all these guys that are producers in their own right. Some of them even Grammy nominated, were training under my mentorship, helping me out in the studio. So I'm no stranger to being a mentor, and I'm no stranger to helping other people like build a career. And I find a lot of like validation in that.
Speaking of building a career, you've built so many different like bands. I mean, it's the list is endless. You have over 100 records to your name. Just kind of curious, how has it been going through these different bands, or even I guess specifically like Devil Wears Prada, where the first thing you did with them got them signed, and then seeing them grow and progress? How has that been throughout the years?
It's interesting. I learned a lot as a person, being a producer for all these bands for all these years. I used to be a much different person. I used to struggle with jealousy and be mad when bands would like work with me for 3 records and then like go and work with somebody else. But now I actually see it from the other point of view, which is like, if I was in a band, would I want to record with the same producer over and over and over again forever? Probably not. So I kind of learned like a lot of like humility and like empathy just through the process of like being a producer and being in those situations. And my friend Tyler actually taught me a lot about that and how to feel about that kind of stuff, because I was, I'm an only child. So only children, they get everything that they want. Like they don't have to compromise. They don't make sacrifices. So like this mentality going into it, you're going to naturally want to be selfish and greedy. You're going to want to record all the best metalcore bands. But then you realize like, well, I'm only one guy and I can only do like 10 records a year. And these bands have been working with me for like 4 records in a row. They probably want to switch some shit up. Like, you start to think of it like practically and pragmatically, and then you realize, oh, it actually doesn't make sense for me to just like own all of this. So I've grown a lot as a person through that process, and learned a lot about myself and about others. And I think because of that, like, it's helped me grow as an adult, and I now look at it as like, you'll never be able to take me out of it, because I made history with the records that I made. So, I'm building that legacy, or I'm leaving that legacy there forever. Like, it's there. Nobody can remove it. And so now I think of it like, okay, well, if I'm teaching people how to make records and I'm building tools that help people make records, it's almost like I'm a part of all the records.
Yeah.
Like more records than I could ever be a part of, like, just as a physical engineer, right? So the impact is now much more scalable, much broader. And I think of it as that. Like, I think of it as like, man, if I could just come up with like the next best way to mix vocals and help all these people do it, I could be a part of like something so huge. And that kind of motivates me as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to put it. I mean, you sacrifice one record to kind of be able to be part of dozens and hundreds. So
Yeah.
So yeah.
Kind of, did you happen to read Rick Rubin's new book by chance?
I have been wanting to get my hands on it. I saw the podcast with Joe Rogan, and I've been wanting to get it since then, but I haven't had a chance yet.
Oh, it's fantastic. But I think he kind of said the same kind of thing. He's like, I only get to work on like 8 records at most a year. But with this book, I can be a part of so much different art and cool shit in this world. So that kind of just reminded me of that. But I guess on that same kind of note, like Phil Spector, his like philosophy on one hand was over here, like I want a wall of sound. And then Rick Rubin over here being like, less is more, the less, more stripped down, the better. Where do you think you've kind of fallen on that spectrum?
Well, I definitely had my 20s where I just thought everything should be huge and epic and you should have a wall of sound for everything. And I learned very quickly that you can get yourself in dangerous territory if you approach everything like that. It's funny too, because there's even some ballads, like I'm pretty sure there's like a Prada ballad that is it's got like 70 or 80 layers. It's supposed to be like this stripped down song, and it kind of sounds stripped down, but I can promise you it's got a lot of stuff going on. And through years and years of doing that, and kind of getting older, and my taste in music is getting older, I go back and listen to like jazz trios. It's just 3 dudes like making the song, right? That's all they got. They got a bass, they got a piano, they got a drum set, maybe a trumpet player or something. And like, it's like, wow, you can create so much with just that. And so now I kind of have the opposite. I want everything to be big and sound big, but not necessarily be like a wall of stuff for you to consume. It's more like I'll create like an environment, and there's a lot to that environment, but the environment's just the background. And then I'm going to bring to the forefront the superhero or the villain or the weapon or the problem, whatever those things are in the song. They come up to you just like you would see in a movie. Like the movie has the wide shot, and then boom, tight shot. And I try to do that with the mixing and with the productions now. All the stuff is still there. There's tons of layers. There's a lot of density to it, but I'm more of the understanding of, well, those things are there and you'll hear them, but I need to have you focus on this. And that's given me so much more clarity to how I approach song productions. And the artists that I work with, I try to explain to them, I'm like, because artists are generally, they want their songs to sound massive and huge, like it's kind of that's just a normal zone to go into. But I'll tell them, I'm like, listen, we gotta keep this focused. If we add too many notes, too many guitars playing the same thing, like it's going to end up getting lost, because I'm going to put the singer is going to be right here, like right in front of the camera. and all this other stuff that we're recording right now is going to be way back here, maybe even covered up by the vocals. So it's kind of pointless, right? Like I try to keep everyone on track with, you know, the most important parts of the production that are actually going to be audible and stand out, and try to not waste too much time on the stuff that you'll probably never hear. And I find that that's working a lot better for me. And it's like a whole new wave. Like if you would have talked to me like this like 8 years ago, I'd be like, oh hell yeah, I layer everything with like tons of strings and like, you know, 17 guitar layers. But it's like now I'm like the opposite. I'm like, can we just have 2 guitar tracks and then maybe maybe a third one sometimes? Like, you know, that's the wave I'm on now.
Yeah, kind of like the if everything's epic, none of it is kind
Mhm.
of, too much of a thing. So kind of just speaking of all these different bands you've worked with, is there any kind of funny or fun stories that kind of, stick out from recording with them throughout the years? I know probably have favorites are hard, but
I've got so many stories.
yes.
The crazy ones. I hope enough time has passed that he won't be mad about this one. But I do remember one time recording Asking Alexandria. We're working on the music and we weren't quite ready for the vocals yet. So Danny was just sort of like bored out of his mind, not really sure what to be doing. And so he'd be like over here, like just staying in this bedroom. This is when I lived in Indiana. We had a 4-bedroom house that we'd record in.
So it was their first record then?
I want to say this is I want to say this is second record.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
pretty sure. Yeah, I think this is the second record. So we would be like going down these endless rabbit holes of like, you know, adding like, I just remember being inside of the session and doing strings for hours and hours, and then like loading up like synth layers and all this stuff. And we're not sure what Danny's going to do. He hasn't told us. He hasn't, he's like, I'm not ready for vocals. And we're like, okay, well, we'll just keep cranking on the music then, you know? And then like this goes on for like several days, to the point where I'm kind of like, all right, I'm starting to get concerned because we have to actually start tracking vocals now, or we're going to maybe go over schedule. And then like, I swear, like not even a day or maybe even hours later, I can't really remember. It's a little hazy, but he like just bursts out of his room, and simultaneously as he comes out of his room, and we haven't seen him for days, walks down the hallway. There's a car pulling into my driveway at the exact same moment. And he has his backpack and all his stuff, opens the door, gets in the car, shuts the car drives off. We had no clue where he was going, if he was going to be back that night. And turns out he like got on a plane and flew away, and we're just like, what the hell is going on?
Oh no.
Jesus.
Oh man. And this is
And
probably before Uber too, right?
yeah, so like it was like obviously had to have been some fan that picked him up or something, And long story short is that I ended up, the label hits me up and is like, hey, we want to record the vocals in LA. I think it's a little bit of a blurry story to me now. I can't remember all the details, but I just remember being blindsided by some shit like that, like, and just being like, okay, like I guess, and then just kind of having to go with it. But I that was such a weird thing, because during those times I was so used to being in control of the whole album, the whole process, like even to the point where I'm the person that delivers the DDP to the pressing plant. Like I'm on an email talking to the pressing plant, like, okay, track 1 is 4 minutes and 3 seconds. And here's the cue sheet. And I type up the cue sheet. Like I did all that shit. Like, and so to me, it was strange to have a project where I felt like I had so much control over it. And then it started like little pieces of it started to go away from me. Like I started to not, I wasn't used to the vocalist just getting up and leaving and then being like, oh, well, now what do I do?
Hey there, Shredheads. We're just taking a little break to let you know that we got merch. And I'm not just talking about any kind of merch. I'm talking about the merch that you wear and you wear it around town. Onlyvans.com. We got merch, merch.com. It's not merch.com, but it's something bonfire. You guys shred merch. You know, it's like a walking billboard, but it's you, and it's really cool because you're supporting us and you look cool. You know, you got a van on fire, and that's what you're wearing. Onlyvans.com. But we also got big things coming soon, and with the big things coming soon, you can let everybody know that your band's got big things coming soon. You know, it's important that everyone knows at all times that you're out there, you're wearing it, and big things are coming soon. So go ahead and buy that. Buy our shit. Thanks.
The Oceano record really taught me how to basically stand up for myself, because up to that moment, I really didn't have to prove myself, because I guess all of my clientele was coming to me because I had already proven myself, right?
Mhm.
That was like, oh yeah, Joey Sturgis, yeah, we want to do our record with him, and then it's like, okay, boom, I got this. Like, and I was used to being in that zone. Like, that's what I thrived on. And then you have a band like them coming in and just going like, I don't know, like, I think, your mixes are pretty good, but we think, this is better, or that, it could be better or whatever. And I'm like, oh shit. So it was one of those situations where I kind of had to like figure out how I was going to navigate it. And so I just got this idea where I was like, okay, I think the problem is that these guys just feel like I don't have this planned very well, or they feel like maybe I just don't they're not confident in me. So what I need to do is like come in with absolute confidence. Like I've got to come in and just be like, all right, this is how it's going to work. And it's like, so I like basically built up this whole plan in my head. And then this was like so awkward for me, because I wasn't used to like having to be like, all right, guys, there's going to be a meeting and it's going to happen at 3
Yeah.
p.m. Like that just wasn't how we rolled. Like people would just show up and then we would just start making a record. And it was just like being in a frat house or some shit. But this was like, okay, guys, we're going to have this meeting. It's going to happen at like 2 p.m. And so like they all gather around, they sit in the couch and I stand in front of them. And then I'm like, reading off my notes of like how I'm going to make their record the best death metal record of like 2009 or whatever. But whatever I said in that speech, like they were just kind of like, all right, respect. Like we believe in you now. And that set forth the rest of the session. I had control of everything, and it was great. And I just had to I had to rise to the occasion. I just had to live up to the standards that they were coming in the door with, right? And it knocked my ego down a little bit, which was a good thing. I was challenged by that, and that I think that's why that record is a little bit of an extra special Joey Sturgis record, because I really did have to like prove myself again. And it still sounds amazing to this day.
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. I think it's so cool that during those times, obviously you're in that grind, like you were saying, as one band's kind of like leaving the driveway, another one's coming in. You're just so busy. But just kind of curious, like how the switch was, because obviously you were doing that so crazy. There's like no natural light. It's like all dark. You're chain smoking, and then going from that to switching over into like living the country life. How was that like transition for you?
It was a weird time because I had not figured out how I was going to. Basically, I had not figured out how everything was going to work. I was living in one place, recording in another, and still trying to figure out how do I take this studio and bring it to my house. And that was a lot of stuff I had to figure out. I had to figure out how are the drums going to work. And by the way, this house that I had bought was built in like the 70s. So like
No internet.
dude, it was insane. Just as an example, in the living room, there was drywall, and then that like fake particle board wood kind of stuff on top of
Yeah.
that. And then on top of that was like wallpaper. And so like
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
like pulling the wallpaper off and you're like, what? There's wood paneling? And then you're pulling the wood paneling off and then you're like, what? There's
There's
drywall?
Couple layers of carpet,
Yeah,
linoleum.
yeah. It's got to be green
And then you-
carpet. What was the
and then-
carpet?
There was carpet everywhere. It was pink, it was purple, it was green. I mean, I had to
Well, wild
rip that
back
house
then. Yeah, they did.
apart to even get it to a point where I was like, all right, we can record here now. You know, like so that was I had to go back and forth. Actually, a funny part of the story is that at the time I was so busy that I literally didn't have time to go get my driver's license. And during this time that you had to hold your that learner's permit, you had to hold it for 6 months before you could take a driver's test, but it would expire after like I want to say 12 months. So I'd get really busy, right? And then my learner's permit would expire. And then I'd be like, oh, well, then I can't take the driver's test. So I have to go get the learner's permit again, hold it for another 6 months, and then try to schedule the driver's test in order to get your license. And I did that dance like 3 or 4 years in a row, and I couldn't make it happen. So I was driving illegally on these back roads from the studio to my house, these country roads where there's never a soul. In a car that had like the same license plate from the person I bought it from. So like it was just like, you know,
Yeah.
it was good times. I also remember in that same car doing donuts in my front yard. And it was like it was one of those moments where like, you know, sometimes you are so serious as a producer that you have to like figure out ways to lighten the mood.
Yeah, blow off steam.
Yeah, blow off some steam, lighten the mood, get everyone to be like, I don't know, get like some kind of cool points.
Mhm.
So I don't know why
I go
I
flip
thought
some
of this.
donuts in my front yard.
I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do some donuts in my front yard, and this band's gonna see me do this, and they're gonna think I'm kind of crazy. So I start doing it, but I didn't realize that the band had they had a project going on in my front yard. They had all these things laid out. I don't even remember what they were. I want to say maybe posters or something.
What band was it?
Of Mice and Men. And they were like they had like the stencils and maybe they were shirts or posters, or something flat, and they had stencils and they were like spray painting the stencils. Here I am in my car, and I see him standing over there. I have no idea what they're doing, but I'm like, I'm gonna do some donuts. So I do the donuts in the yard, and my back tire whips around and it just goes over all their work, like ruins it all, like every post, whatever it was. I can't remember if it was posters or shirts or whatever, but it was like, yeah, I just ruined it all. And I was like, oh my God.
So instead of looking cool, they're like, fuck, Joey, you just
Yeah,
ruined all
dude.
your shit.
Fucking
Was this in the
backfired
day or
on
the
me.
night?
It was in the daytime, yeah.
It was
Like,
the day. What are your neighbors thinking?
I don't know if they saw it or not.
What kind of car?
It was a Honda Accord,
Yeah, what color? Black?
tan.
Tan?
There you go.
So did they get mad at you after you destroyed everything?
I think they were just kind of confused, but also like we were all just laughing because it just like it was so absurd. It was just like, what is going on right now?
Wait, so where does you're just hanging out and you're just like, I'm gonna hop in my car and do donuts? There was no like
Yeah,
nothing beforehand.
I don't remember what I was thinking, but
That's
that's what happened.
That actually just reminded me of I remember watching a Miss May I vlog when they were recording with you, and I remember them. I think they were playing like a NASCAR game the
Yeah, yeah.
entire time.
I mean, those vlogs are a fraction of what really went on. Like, obviously, there was certain things that we wouldn't upload, but
Right.
Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
it was like just pure chaos. If you can imagine, you know, you're working on these records, you've got these big record budgets. The band has just gotten signed. They're about to go on like a endless tour. It was just a good time. Like, you know,
Yeah.
we were all doing exactly what we wanted to do, and there was no adults in the room. Like, you know, we were the
Right,
adults.
right.
So
Yeah.
it was
You gotta
crazy.
live life to the full, man.
Yeah.
For sure. It would have been sad if you didn't, honestly.
Yeah, and like the story I told earlier, like some of that stuff was crazy. Like there was some crazy things that happened. Like another story with asking in the this would be a short one. Somebody in the town told people where I lived because
Oh,
our town was so
no.
small. So like we'd have fans driving by at 2 a.m. going like, I love you out their car window as they pass by my house. And all my neighbors getting pissed off. They're like, why is there all these people like driving down our road and shit? And I'm like, I didn't tell them where I live. Like, it's
Yeah,
the
you don't want that.
freaking gas station clerk down the street telling everybody to come over here.
Oh
So,
man. I just kind of curious for you, like while you're doing all these and all these like historic bands are coming. I mean, obviously they are now, but at the time, maybe they're still starting off or whatever else. But at any point, do you get a chance to kind of step back from the canvas and kind of realize like this is such a great moment in my life? Like all these bands and all these are not just affecting my life, but like the whole world. Did you have a chance at any point to like think about that kind of impact on the world you were creating?
I remember the exact moment. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it.
Hell yeah.
I went to this thing called South by So What, and mind you, at this time when I'm there, and I don't remember what year it is. It's I don't know. Let's call it 2009, 2010, something like that. Um, this is like not part of my character. Like it's not normal for me to like go somewhere because I just sit in a studio and make records. That's like what I did.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of traveling to a different state is like absurd. But at the time I was dating this girl, she wanted to go. I was like, you know what? I haven't really been to a big event like this before, so I kind of want to go too. And so we worked it out to where I made it so I could make it happen in my schedule. And the only way we could get there was to drive. So we drove literally like
To
24.
Texas?
Yeah, dude, 24-hour drive straight
From Indiana, right?
from Indiana. We get there, everyone's like, holy shit, Joey Sturgis is here. This is fucking crazy, right? And then like I'm meeting all these people, everything's going super well. And I go to the South by So What show. Asking Alexandria is headlining. There's like 4,000 people in the room. I'm sitting in the back, and this is when like Morta Adabo came out. So they got that huge like intro that I built for the song where like all the buildings are crumbling and there's like the death choir singing these crazy. And so like in that moment, the band isn't doing anything on stage. The whole place is lit up with what I created on my computer in my house in
Right.
Indiana. So I'm in the back. I'm like in tears. I'm like, this is insane, dude.
That's
There's
awesome.
4,000 people like listening to this right now, and they're all screaming their heads off. And then like the band comes in and it's super heavy, and like so it's this big magical moment where like I had not realized, I'd not taken even a second to think about like the numbers on the screen. Like, when you see, oh, like 1 million people heard this track on MySpace, you're like, wow, that's crazy. But you don't think about like 1 million people standing over there, right?
Right. Yeah.
So even to see like 4,000 people like hearing it all being played back super loud on a huge PA system was just like a mind-blowing thing for me. And then Tino from Of Mice and Men, the drummer, sees me standing there just kind of like freaking out, and he comes up to me and he puts his arm around me and he's like, you helped create this, man, like don't forget this. And I was just like, holy shit. And I was, it was so emotional. I'm almost getting emotional now thinking about it. But that moment and that day was when I was like, oh shit, like I actually have done something here. Like I'm a part of something huge. And I think I still probably don't understand the full extent of it. Like I do remember seeing like, Austin Carlisle on stage doing vocals with Chester Bennington and just being like, what the fuck? Like, this is crazy.
Yeah. I was going to ask that actually, because I remember like different points where it's like, obviously for us growing up, we were in that kind of scene and we're opening up for all your bands that you recorded and whatever else. And that was always a thing like, oh, if you want to make it, you got to record with Joey Sturgis. And like you looked at the Warped Tour lineup, or you looked at like, I have this Rise Records box set, like every one of them, pretty much other than a few of them, are all your bands that you've recorded. And I remember that time when Linkin Park played at Warped Tour, and then like Devil Wears Prada, all those dudes got up and did songs with them. Is that crazy from your perspective? Like, I mean, you basically helped them get signed, and now where they are touring the world and the impact they've made it's got to be crazy.
It is crazy to see what a lot of these bands have gone on to do with their careers, and to see them like in the same way that I've grown and started a software company and create an education company. I mean, they've gone on to do arena tours and, Asking Alexandria, like playing shows with Shinedown and stuff, like, just big stuff. And then on top of that, like another humbling moment for me too was just having like the Grammys reach out to me and be like, hey, like we need your help. Like we're having a really rough time with the rock side of things. And our chairman, who is Johnny K, the guy that recorded Disturbed's first record and several others, is like actually literally asking and requesting me to be a part of the Grammys to help them like fix the metal and rock nominees and stuff. And I'm just like, what the hell? Like, this is
What the hell?
you tell this to 14-year-old Joey and he's not going to believe you whatsoever. So yeah, I've gone to do like some really cool stuff, really important things that I'm very proud of. And I'm just happy to be a part of the bigger picture,
Yeah. I mean, thank you from us too, because you've affected our lives so much as well, just from all the work that you've done. How do you, I mean, your parents must be super proud of you. Like if you can sit, you have a, same with your Uncle Dan, like everybody.
Yeah, like my grandpa Keith never got to see all this stuff that I've done, but luckily my parents have, and most of my family. So, they're incredibly proud, of course. And I actually have been doing some stuff with my dad because, I know he's getting older. He's not going to be here forever. So I'm like trying to like, record music with him when I can.
That's
like,
awesome.
we've got 3 songs that we've made. My mom plays keys on it. Like I send him my
that's
software. He uses it on his guitar tracks. Like, yeah, it's a cool
Dude,
thing that we're trying to connect through.
family jam session.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so cool, man. Yeah. Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Just you kind of mentioned like all the new stuff you're working on now. I know that you have a lot of really cool kind of things in the works, and with this new plugin that's, you guys got, it's supposed to kind of bridge the gap between kind of that marketing type audio that you have and you hear versus like, all the different variables you can have at your own home studio. Do you want to kind of talk about the new Joey Sturgis tones and what's kind of going forward with those?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you that probably have, I mean, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with me to some degree. But I'm finding it interesting now because some people find out about me because they actually know my plugins. They don't even know about my past.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's like a whole new thing that I'm dealing with now. But yeah, so like our audio software company creates a variety of products, things from like vocal processing plugins to like mixing plugins to guitar tone oriented plugins, things like that. And they're all solution based. It's all around the idea that if you have a problem, we want to create a product that solves it, rather than like a lot of other plugin companies that'll emulate other old analog gear that the classic 1176 compressor emulator, limiter emulator, whatever. I mean, the way that I looked at it was like, I don't know what 1176 does. I don't know what it sounds like. Never touched one. So why would I buy a plugin of it? So that was my thought process. But we've been working on a really cool plugin for the last 2 years. It's a guitar tone oriented plugin. I can't give away too many details because we're going to start teasing it here pretty soon.
Yeah.
But I'm really proud of it. And like you said, it bridges the gap between one of the biggest problems of being a guitar enthusiast and having all these amps and these pedals and all these guitars and all this software on your computer is that a lot of it's designed around like old designs that never changed. Like the people who created, the Marshall amps probably never imagined that we would have 8-string guitars tuned to drop F.
Right. Yeah.
So like the circuitry models and everything is like based around a 6-string, tuned in E standard. how is it going to handle those low end frequencies? How is it going to be able to deal with the demands of like the modern guitarist? And so we have some really interesting technology that we've been working on that we feel helps solve some of those kinds of problems. And I can't wait to share it with everybody. We're going to announce it on our Instagram here pretty soon. So my plug, I guess, is just,
You plug in on your plugins.
Yeah.
yeah, my plug on my plugins is to ask people to follow me on follow not me but Joey Sturgis Tones on Instagram.
Hell yeah.
Sweet.
We actually have we had some fans send in some questions, if that's okay, if we
Yeah.
get to those real quick.
Love that.
Yeah. Well, and really quick. So just, I mean, so I'm a drummer, started as a drummer and then got into production. So it feels like we keep seeing like this correlation of drummers who always get into like the producer role. Do you have any idea like why why that always happens? Why is it always the drummer that
I
guitar
mean,
players can't play drums?
yeah, I mean, dude, the most important thing, in my opinion, of a good production is that the timing is in the pocket. And that
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily always mean that everything has to be on the grid. It just means that you need to understand like the timing correlation between instruments and how like if I'm playing like an eighth note sort of syncopated beat, and in between some of those hits there's something else doing eighth notes, but they're on like different hits, even if the spacing is off a little bit, like it's going to sound messy. And that extrapolates all the way into the mix, to being able to have your mix punchy, to being able to have your low end tight. Like it has a lot to do with drums, man. It just has a lot to do with like things being on time, things being equally spaced, not even just being on the downbeats. It has to be spaced apart, the right amount of spacing and all that kind of stuff. And that's why I think drummers are good producers, is because we have that skill to hear when things are too slow, or they're behind the beat, or they're ahead of the beat, they're early, you know. And I was, you know, I always have been hyper obsessed with perfection when it comes to production. So timing is like number one. Like that's the first thing that I focus on.
Mhm.
I think that's why drummers gravitate towards computers and gravitate towards producing in the box, because you have control over all of that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that actually leads into this next question, which is where how do you draw the line for when a project is done? Because if you can sit and tweak stuff all day, all night. So how do you decide when a project is done, or how do you set that limit?
I think you have, if you have the option to set boundaries, because sometimes you're not in control of your schedule. Like if you're doing a record for a record label, they're going to just tell you like we need it done by this day. So then you're like, all right, cool. I have a deadline. Awesome. Like I got to stick to this. But if you're kind of just making an album and you're not sure when you're ever going to release it, you should give yourself like you should give yourself a deadline. I feel like, there's some people that get crushed under pressure, and there's some people that actually perform under pressure. And I feel like if you are one of those people that can perform under pressure, a deadline is your motivation. It is your inspiration. It's kind of everything, the fire under your ass, to get the damn thing done. So I always just say, even if you don't know what your release date is, or even if you don't know when you want to finish a project, just make it up so that you'll have some kind of deadline to respect in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the tentative deadline, that even if that way, if you need to like extend it, you at least have, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think Rick Rubin talks about that in his book too, if anyone's wanting to look that up.
So when you got started, I mean, a lot of these bands, albums were kind of the way to go. Like you just always expect a band to put out an album, but nowadays it's more oriented around like singles or EPs, at least as far as like the release cadence. So do you think that's changing like a producer's role at all? How do you see that kind of affecting the production side of things?
I think we're in a very interesting time period where people have gear at home. They have the ability to record themselves. They can do it in a high quality fashion. They can even do it in a way to where it could be a usable track in a final production. So my advice to everyone, and even my own clients, is get your setup at home going so that when you feel that magic and you have the idea or you just wrote the part, you can track it and we can actually use it on the album. I don't like the process of people coming into the studio and trying to redo everything all at once. It actually takes away from the art. It takes away from the magic. Like, a lot of the magic happens because you had some sort of moment with it and you captured that. I can't capture that again. Like, you're going to come in and just perform it like from your memory now, not from the heart or from the gut. And this is a little while back, like 2014, but my buddy Tyler was like, "Hey, I want you to produce the Danger Kids album." And I was like, "Nah." I was like, "You're going to produce it. You're going to record it in your bedroom because you're going to stay up till 3 a.m. getting every vocal take exactly how you want it. But as soon as you show up to the studio, you're on the clock and you're going to sacrifice. You're not going to get things the way that you want them." And he was like, "Oh shit." So he he was very nervous. He didn't want to do the album himself. He wasn't like confident in himself, but me telling him no forced him into confidence to do the album. And it came out amazing. And I ended up mixing it, which I had so that I was able to like have my part in it. But I'm so glad I told him to do that, because if he didn't do that, he would have come to the studio. We would have had to rush the vocals, and we would have probably only had like 10 days. They probably would have lost their voice on like day 3 or 4. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not how I think records should be made anymore. Now that everybody has access to like great mics and headphones that are you can virtually take your headphones anywhere. Like, you know what I mean? There's just so much technology. We should just be using that and getting better stuff.
Yeah, I think that's what's so cool about your tones and your plugins, everything as well, is you try to make it as like simple as possible and user friendly, because there's nothing more frustrating, like you were saying. Like, you come up with an idea, you got to get that down as soon as possible. So if you're trying to sit there and upload everything and it like makes it super complicated, then it's like, what's the point? You might as well, your idea's already gone and you're already pissed off. Like, I can't even stand pedals with like more than 5 knobs. Like, get the fuck out of here. If I have to play with it for 20 minutes to try to figure it out, I don't want it.
Yeah.
The less variability, the more room to kind of spend more time. It's like analysis paralysis in a way. So yeah, I agree with that. And then speaking on the plugins, like, I think there's always been kind of a negative attitude toward like samples and amp sims, and probably even more so as you were getting started. So, and that's a big part of your company. So I guess, where do you see that going? Because it's only continuing to evolve. And speaking of the plugin we were just talking about, so do you see that coming more into the mainstream than it already is, like people having less and less of a negative attitude toward that stuff?
I mean, I would hope so. I think it gets you closer to your art in a way. Like, I'm sure there's people who argue against that. Like, they feel like, oh, well, sitting next to my amp is where I feel the most inspired or something. And I get that. But, we're in modern times where the world is moving at a faster pace. There's more demand. I mean, social media hasn't increased the demand to have a new single every month or so. Like, fans aren't satisfied with just one album a year anymore. Like, the need for innovation, not only just in your riffing and in your sound, but in your ability to create it and innovate and iterate on it, is higher than ever. Like, so technology naturally is going to be a part of that process. And I think that technology also speeds it up. So I think that, like, people should just, if you're not into the whole digital guitar tone thing, that's totally cool. It's a tool. Nobody can deny that it's not a tool. It can be useful in a lot of different ways. And if you don't want it on your record, then you don't have to have it on your record. But I see more and more people embracing it, and I do see that technology is getting to the point now to where it's very, very hard to tell the difference between the two. And it's only going to get more and more better as machine learning becomes faster and faster, and the ability to use a neural network to recreate a guitar tone from scratch is going to get crazier and crazier, just like it is to have Chat GPT write emails for you. Like this is just the way that it's going to move. And I also think that there will be a renaissance of natural, organic music. People, 4 guys standing in a room recording an album live. Somebody's going to like that, and that's going to sell on vinyl only and not even be available on streaming platforms. And people are going to love the shit out of that just as much as they're going to love the next Slipknot record that's recorded on Pro Tools.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's no right or wrong way to do it. They're just tools. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just to add to that, I think what's great about that and great about the stuff that you're doing is that more musicians that maybe couldn't get their ideas kind of on paper or get their ideas heard have that resource to do so. So I do think that's great.
Or if they don't have a band, they can do everything themselves.
Yeah, exactly. If you can't play drums, you don't need to know how to play drums. You can do that all in the box. So yeah.
Drumforge.
Buy
it. So
Absolutely.
I guess just to kind of wrap up, thank you again so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Just to kind of wrap it up, what would you say is like your most enjoyable aspect of producing?
Most enjoyable aspect of producing is when I can see the moment that the artist hears the song and it sounds how they imagined it. And that's sometimes it's a moment you don't get, because sometimes you'll finish a record, it's all done, the band has already gone home, you're doing it by yourself, you're sending it over email, you don't get to see how they react to your work. Album comes out, you don't get to see how they react to that. They're on stage somewhere for their release show, you're not there. You know what I mean? Like, so the moment when you can actually be in the same room as an artist, and you're the producer, and you actually feel their reaction to their music being exactly how they want it, is what makes it. That's a feeling that I chase. That's a feeling that I like to have. And every once in a while, I try to, if I get everybody in the same city at the same time, I'm like, come over to my house. We're going to listen to the record from beginning to end. Cause I want to like have everybody in the room and have everybody going like, oh my God, that part's so sick. That's the magic for me. I love those moments.
I think like as you're kind of saying that, I can envision almost the bands having that same moment that you had at the Asking Alexandria performance, that it's like they now get to hear what's in their head. And so you're kind of giving that to them in a way. So
yeah. And I mean, even the text, if it's just a text message too, and it's just like you just sent them the mix and they like text you like 7 minutes later, like, oh my God, you're like, yes. I love that. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Well, thanks so much again for talking to us. Is there anything else you wanted to like kind of plug or talk about?
Man, I just, thanks for having me. It's been great to talk with you guys. I really think you're doing something awesome with this podcast, and I hope your audience gets something out of this episode. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Take care.
Peace, guys.
Thanks for listening to You Guys Shred.